Hello everyone. In this video, we will talk about two important aspects of learning Chinese characters. First, how to learn Chinese characters through radicals, and second, the conversion rules of traditional and simplified characters. My name is Isaac Jacobs, and I'm a senior studying Chinese at BYU, and I'm graduating this December. Chinese has about 3,500 commonly used characters. How many should students master at different stages? According to the Chinese Proficiency Standard for International Chinese Education, beginning level learners should be able to read 900 and write 300 Chinese characters. Intermediate learners should be able to read 1,800 and write 700 characters. Advanced learners should be able to read 3,000 and write 1,200 characters. With so many Chinese characters, how can students learn them quickly? A useful way for character learning is using radicals to help understand and memorize Chinese characters, in addition to practicing reading and writing characters. Chinese characters are composed of different radicals and components. Students can divide Chinese characters into different radicals and components, learn and memorize the structure of Chinese characters, and use the radicals and components to associate other characters. For example, the three characters tiao, jump, pao, run, and ti, to kick, have the same radical, the blue part, and the meaning of these three are related to the movements of the feet. These characters can be linked to better learn and memorize. The component on the right of the four Chinese characters, qin, meaning please, qin, sunny, qing, clear, qing, emotion, are the same. These four characters have similar pronunciation, and they can also be linked to better learn and memorize. Nearly 70% of all Chinese characters are xin, shen, zi, semi-phonetic compounds. These types of characters consist of two parts, one of which is related to the meaning of the character. This part is called xingpang, semantic radical. The other part is related to the pronunciation of the character, which is called shenpang, phonetic radical. For semantic phonetic compound characters, students can guess and associate the meaning and pronunciation of the characters through radicals and components. For example, in the Chinese character men, ren is the semantic radical, indicating that the meaning of the character is related to people, and man is the phonetic radical, indicating that the pronunciation of the character is related to man. Through the radical of ren, students can associate and learn the following Chinese characters: ni, you, ta, he/him, zuo, to do, shi, let, xiu, to rest. The meaning of these characters are related to people. Note that characters with the radical ren are not always associated with people. For example, shama, for what. Through the radical of man, you can associate and learn the following Chinese characters: one, to ask; one, to hear; man, boring; man, to cover. The pronunciation of these characters is related to man. Also note that characters with the radical of man are not always related to man. For example, jian and xian. Learning and memorizing radicals is very helpful in learning Chinese characters. Here are some of the most common radicals. Characters with 口字旁 radicals are usually related to mouth. Characters with 单人旁 radicals are usually related to people. Characters with 日字旁 radical are usually related to time. Characters with 提手旁 radical are usually related to hand. Characters with 提土旁 radicals are usually related to soil or floor. Characters with 木字旁 radical are usually related to wood. Next one is 月字旁 radical. Characters with 言字旁 radical are usually related to speech. Characters with 木字旁 radicals are usually related to eyes. Characters with 竖心旁 radicals are usually related to mental activities. Characters with 心字底 radical are usually related to mental activities. Next one is 右字旁 characters with 女字旁 radical are usually related to women. Characters with 三点水 radical are usually related to water, and so on and so on. Characters with 立刀旁 radicals are usually related to knife. Next one is 双耳刀 radical. And the next one is 门字宽 radical, which are usually related to door. Characters with 玉字旁 radical are usually related to jade, and so on and so on. Next one is 人字头 radical and 八字头 radical. Characters with 竹字头 radical are usually related to bamboo. Characters with 管字头 radical are usually related to house. And they continue. The simplification of Chinese characters is a major change in Chinese language reform. The purpose of this policy is to help people learn Chinese characters faster and increase the literacy rate in China. In general, simplified characters retain the overall structure of traditional characters and simplified Chinese characters by reducing strokes. Compared with traditional characters, simplified characters have an average of 5.8 fewer strokes per character. Students usually learn one Chinese character system first and then the other. It is easier to learn traditional characters first and then learn simplified, while the process of learning simplified characters first and then traditional characters is more complex. But in any case, to learn the two Chinese character systems more efficiently, students can focus on the following two aspects. First, master the conversion of common radicals and components between simplified and traditional. Next, pay attention to character pairs where one simplified character corresponds to multiple traditional characters. First, let's see the conversion of common radicals and components between simplified and traditional characters. The radicals of these simplified characters are different in traditional characters, and the radicals of these simplified characters have only one form in the traditional characters. See the summary and examples in the table. In this table, the components of the simplified characters are different in traditional characters, and the components of these simplified characters have only one form in traditional characters. The radicals of some simplified characters correspond to 2 or 3 different radicals in traditional characters. Students should pay special attention to these one-to-many conversions. For example, there are 2 forms of 两点水 radicals in simplified Chinese characters. One is 两点水, which is the same as simplified Chinese characters such as 冰 and 冷 in 冰冷 and 次 in 一次. The other form is 三点水, for example, in 决 in 决定 and 况 in 情况, 减 in 减少 and 净 in 干净. This table shows the examples of one-to-many pairs, with one simplified radical corresponding to 2 and 3 traditional forms. This table shows an example of one-to-many pairs, with one simplified component corresponding to 2 and 3 traditional forms. Except for the above-mentioned radicals, other commonly used radicals are the same in both simplified and Chinese characters, and here's a list of them. On to the next page. And then finally, this last page.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Bowers. I'm a student at BYU, just like the rest of you. The only difference is that I was lucky enough to be a part of the research with Professor Liu this summer. So for this part of the presentation, what we're going to be looking at is that conversion between the simplified and traditional characters. We'll be able to notice a little bit a few relationships between characters. It is a little bit complicated because in addition to the changes in radicals and components, sometimes a simplified character can be converted into multiple traditional characters depending on the word that it's part of. And so we just need to pay special attention to the way that it is used in different words, just these conversions. For example, for our first word, we have 皇后. So the hou in 皇后, both its simplified and traditional character is the same. But these other words, 后来,后面,后天,后果,以后, These are all its traditional variant, as we can see. So we're just going to look at these relationships for a couple different examples, and then I'll give you a list of 300 of the most common characters that have these relationships. So the next one we have 面,前面,面子,表面,方面,面包,面条. So we can see that it turns into its traditional form when talking about food, at least when you'll be writing this in class. That is when you'll be writing the traditional form, is when you're talking about things related to food. Next we have 系,中文系,联系. Now we have this 系 right here for 关系. But if you could notice that I just said I didn't have a tone. And I'll just point that out because 系, this second 系 by itself is fourth tone, but when 关系, it's usually said without the fourth tone. And then we have its other traditional variant, which is also 系, but because for this specific situation, buckle your seatbelt, we say 系,系安全带. Fourth, we've got 鸡,茶几,几乎. And then when talking about quantity, we have our third tone, 几,几个,市集. Next, we have 中,几点钟,钟情,钟爱. Next, we have 准,批准,准备,准时. Next, we have 游,游泳,旅游,游戏. Then 只,只有,只要,只好,只能,一只猫. Next we have 发,发现,发展,发生,出发,头发. And the 发, if you'll just notice, I did use another neutral tone. That's another one where more commonly people will say it with a neutral tone rather than a fourth tone. If you were to say with a fourth tone, people would still understand you. But I'll just point that out. Next we have 10. We have 干,干我,干什么. Then our 干, first tone, 干净,干预,干杯,干燥. Next we have 了,受不了,了解. We have 复,重复,复习,复杂,回复,恢复. 13 we have 据,截据,根据,据说,依据,受据. 14 we have 板,黑板,木板,老板. Then 借,借书,借钱,借口. 16 we have 历,历史,日历,并且,合并,医病. 18 we have 尽,尽力,用尽,尽量,尽快. 19 we have 划,划船. And our fourth tone, 划, there's two 计划 here. Well, we have 计划 and 规划. So I'm just reading these off. But when you're going through these, be sure to be thorough in how these differ from traditional and simplified. Especially when a lot of you may have started learning Chinese only in simplified, but I believe in 101 and 102, 201 and 202, for sure the Chinese classes will be using traditional characters. And I'll talk a little bit more at the end. We'll keep going. I don't think there's many more left. We have 获得,获取,受,获, 志,志气,志祥,杂志,日志. Then we have 制度,制造. Next we have 冲突，冲出去，冲动. Then this is one of the only times when you're going to see this 冲 in a fourth tone is when you're using it as like an adjective. 说话很冲. Next we have 冲 as in 冲水 and 冲走. For 24 we have 舍 as in 舍得 or 舍不得 and 舍弃. Then the other form 舍 as in 宿舍. Next we have 赞 赞成 赞扬 夸赞 赞美 称赞 then 治导致以致医治细致 Next 困难很困家里家具 then 脏很脏心脏 And next, I'm not going to read all of these off. That would take forever. But I'm just going to go through each slide. I'll give you about 5 seconds per slide. And if you want, you can pause the recording. And so when I'm going through this list, you can pause it and make note of the characters you know how to read and write. And so as we can see, we have, where's my mouse? Here it is. Okay. So we have our 简体 column and our 繁体 column, followed by the pinyin. And then after the 简体and 繁体 pinyin, they're followed by word examples that the characters are used in. So, I accidentally went down a slide. Okay, so 5 seconds for each side. Okay, that is the end of this presentation. And here we have this link if you want to download the course. So I should have what Isaac's presentation have and my presentation, all of the tables and columns. Should be a small packet or booklet. You should be able to download it, and you can do that by visiting the link, the website. Hopefully this has been helpful in your Chinese learning. You're great, work hard. Chinese is the hardest language ever, but I know all of you can do it, and me too, because I'm no better than you are. But I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, ask your professors. Awesome. Well, thank you. I believe that is it for now. See you around campus.